What's up, all you cool cats and kittens? This is Mike Booch, a.k.a. Snooched the Booch, a.k.a. your E-Bombay, a.k.a. your warrior and king. Thanks so much for coming back for part 2 of Black Panther. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, then head to your podcatcher of choice and listen to part 1 so that way you can get introduced to Josh and listen to us start to break down the movie. We're going to pick up right where we left off, so sit tight and enjoy part 2 of our Black Panther breakdown.
3, 2, 1.
A bad habit is hard to break no matter what it is. But I think with the two of them specifically, they're two sides of the same coin. Their biggest difference to me is environment and circumstances. I think T'Challa could have easily been Eric and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say N'Jobu was Black Panther and he was in Wakanda and T'Chaka was on the War Dog assignment. That could have easily been T'Challa, who ended up becoming Terrence and joining the military, graduating from MIT, doing all that other stuff, going on these assignments, destroying foreign countries from the government, and doing all the things that Killmonger did. I think that was intentional, and it was meant to show how these differences in their lives caused them to be two completely different people when they came from the same place, essentially.
And that's absolutely... Really quick, did you say that his American name would have been Terrence?
I think it would have been Terrence.
That's amazing. You said some really good stuff, but that's really what I got out of it, is that he's going to be Terrence. King Terrence. So yeah, and when you look at the ways that they both lost their fathers, and when they lost their fathers, mm-hmm. T'Challa was barely able to deal with that as an adult.
Yes.
But yet, it was super common for that stuff to happen in Oakland.
It was something that he had seen often, but when it happened to him, obviously him being a child, you see it did affect him. What I will say is this: while T'Challa was barely able to deal with it, ultimately I think he dealt with his father's passing better than Eric did, because of how old he was and where he was at in his life.
Absolutely.
Because while I would make the argument that both were changed by the death of their fathers, given the point he was at, they opted to handle it differently.
Well, definitely, and that really is the whole point, and that's what their world views are based on. And you see this when... We're going to skip around a little bit because I have some stuff earlier in the movie I want to get back to. But while we're on the comparison of Killmonger and Black Panther, let's talk about when they both went into the ancestral plane. T'Challa goes into the ancestral plane, is in this beautiful... He's in a literal plane.
Yes.
Where these panthers are, and that's how he sees his father.
Literal and metaphysical plane.
Exactly. Whereas Eric, he goes back to that apartment.
Home.
Yes, he goes back to his home. And there's this moment where they show him as a child and how he found out about his birthright, and he comes face to face with his father. And this is such a beautiful moment because he has to come off as hard. Mm-hmm. He has to come off as emotionally distant and invulnerable so he doesn't show any weakness. And his father notices that. And he says, "No tears for me, no tears for your father." And he just says, "Everybody dies."
That's what happens around here.
That's what happens around here.
But then what's funny is child Eric says that, but present day adult Eric does shed a tear. And it's interesting because that whole conversation was almost a flashback to that point in time when Eric was a child, and when he's being told all these stories of Wakanda, and even how the interaction begins with he's coming in there as an adult. He's moving the board on the wall as an adult, But as soon as you hear Njobu say, "What did I tell you about going through my things?" he reverts back to a child.
And that happens to all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No matter how grown up you are, there's something about your parents that will always bring out that child in you.
Yes.
For better or for worse.
For worse. And he's looking at journals. He's looking at the ring that belonged to his grandfather, Njobu's dad. And, you know, they're having this conversation. And then you still have child Eric. And, you know, you have Njobu saying, you know, we're lost. They can't find us. And then he goes back to being adult Eric. And he goes, no, we're right here. Maybe they're the ones that's lost. And I thought that was very powerful. And I thought that that's the moment where I think if you weren't a fan of his, maybe that was the moment, because now you understand why he's doing what he's doing. Because he makes it a point to say when he's speaking to the council, you know, like what you were saying earlier, anytime black people try to start a revolution, they get shut down. He goes, where was Wakanda? So it's like you really understand him, I think, on a character level. Like, I think they did a really good job of fleshing him out. Even though he was meant to be the foil, he was meant to be the antagonist, the adversary. I think they did a great job of fleshing him out.
And he's not too far off from the state of mind that M'Baku is in.
Yes.
Where he has this whole idea of, okay, well, where is Wakanda? Like, where is the crown for us when we're exiled, when we're elsewhere? You know, where's this inclusivity? And that's where Eric is coming from. And I do like that idea of, we may be the minority here, but maybe we're not the ones who are wrong here.
Very true.
And it does take his experience to teach T'Challa a lesson.
Yeah.
Which, let's put a pin in that right now. Let's finish up Korea real quick, okay? So we go through this amazing chase after their costumes are doing awesome after Black Panther's costume is doing awesome stuff. This, I think, is where the movie passes the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test is a test for stories, movies, books to determine whether it's not feminist necessarily, but in order to pass the Bechdel test, you need to have two woman characters, each with their own name, who talk to each other about something that is not related to a man.
Interesting.
You'd be surprised how many movies fail this test.
Wow, I've never even heard of that test.
A lot of them fail the Bechdel test, but Black Panther does not, because Nakia and Okoye have a conversation about guns and how they're primitive and everything, and you know, they're pretty much useless against vibranium stuff. Whereas the Dora Milaje, Okoye included, used their spears. This was a big problem I had seen before the movie come out. There were actually black people complaining that that's how they were being represented in movies. They were like, really, they're this advanced nation and they're still using spears. But really, the spear is used because they upgraded it in their own way.
Oh, yeah.
They kept their traditions with it.
See, and this is another example of tradition actually being beneficial. Because I think, like I was saying before, they're showing how tradition both benefits and hinders a country or a people, a culture. And this is another example of it shining through ultimately because, you know, spear, it takes great skill to wield such a weapon and use it effectively. So if it was a regular run-of-the-mill spear, they'd be outclassed against almost anyone unless they were just using just hand-to-hand. Seeing how they use their advanced technology and their more cultured way of doing things, they upgrade such a simple and ancient weapon and made it more useful than a gun. So it's like, while yes, it's a spear, but it's a very high-end, sophisticated spear, for sure. I'll take that spear over an M16 any day.
Absolutely. And that's also shown later with the border tribe. They have their cloaks that are actually shields.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, they have holographic shields, but they don't lose their culture in...
Exactly. So you get to flex and be safe at the same time.
Exactly.
And they ride rhinos.
Now, let's go to this Savage line, because Ulysses Claw, played by Andy Serkis, to great effect.
Oh, he was great.
So awesome.
Great. Like, the one thing I will say, I was very happy that this was a predominantly black casted film, and that the white actors were limited to two, but the two that were in this movie were great. They played their roles very well, and Claw, just Andy Serkis is just a great actor, just through and through. So he has these little comments that he's made about Wakanda throughout the movie, his time in the movie, and he's always referring to them as savages. So what I found to be interesting about that is the fact that he's calling them savages, but they are like the most tech savvy country in the world right now. But he's calling them savages. Not only that, he is consistently going after vibranium, which is native to Wakanda, because he feels as if they don't use it the way it should be used. And what's also crazy to me is that his arm, which he has an arm cannon for, is from Wakanda. So you're after items from Wakanda, you're using tech from Wakanda, but they're still the savages. Meanwhile, you are scraping around to feed off of what they have for you to make a living. I just thought that was very interesting.
And of course, we see savages being used a lot today as well. And it's not the first time it's been used. We've heard, more subversive terms than the N-word itself being used to discredit and dehumanize the black community. We've heard, we'll call them monkeys, we'll call them wildings, the wolf pack, right? That's when the Central Park Five were arrested.
Like, call them spirit chuckers and porch monkeys and everything else like that. So
and thugs.
Yeah, it's all coded language, because what I did want to ask you was, do you think that Claw was specifically calling the Wakandan savages based off of his dealings and experiences with them? Because if you noticed, he must have been captured at one point, because he did have that brand behind his ear that he showed to Killmonger. Do you think that is solely for Wakandans because he has that hatred for them? Or do you think that extends to anybody African? Because it didn't seem, or anybody black, I should say, because what I also noticed was that he called Killmonger boy often. And for those of you that don't understand the connotation with that, that is another piece of coded language that old crusty ass white men used to use to kind of be a derogatory term towards black men.
Mm-hmm. I never thought about it as referring to anyone who is just from the continent. I thought he was referring to Wakanda specifically. And I think the big reason why is because he doesn't want to believe that they are what they are. He says that vibranium isn't being used the way it should be used. So in his mind, they are savages for not using it that way. But we also notice that he will use vibranium to profit at any moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this kind of undertone of cultural appropriation.
Yeah, because what's interesting to me is just the fact that I'm wondering, what is the way they should be using it? Should they solely be using it for profit? Because he's going into detail about what Wakanda really is when he was captured and he was being questioned by Ross. He goes, do you know what they are? When we talked about this earlier, when he said third world country, textiles, stuff like that. He goes, no, they're the real El Dorado. He goes on to say that they use vibranium, and he goes, they've been mining it for thousands of years and they still haven't scratched the surface. He goes, they use it, they weave it through their clothes. They use it for weapons and for other technological advances. And we've seen pretty much the full extent of how they use vibranium. They use it for damn near everything.
Everything.
And they're able to use something that may eventually become a finite resource, but what it is right now, it's not finite right now. And they've been mining it for thousands of years, and they still haven't scratched the surface yet. So they're able to interweave this metal into any and everything that they do to improve upon it, to the point to where Shuri was able to heal what would probably be a fatal injury to Ross using vibranium and the Kimoyo beads. And what's crazy to me is the fact that Claw still calls them savages.
Yeah, and he knows that they're not primitive.
Yeah, but they're still savages.
But to him, they're still savages.
And it's crazy because it's just, and they've been using it for years. And it's just, in the moment where he's describing all this stuff, he's almost marveling what they do with it, but still has that enmity and that disdain towards them to still refer to them as savages.
Well, he is not so much different from anyone in white America who profits off of black culture and black bodies, but still refuses to acknowledge the black voice. Let's use the NFL for an example. They profit off the use and abuse of black bodies on a daily basis. And when I say profit, with a capital P, but once an individual kneels down to bring attention to something that's affecting their community, that's when it becomes an issue. And news commentators say the same thing about anyone, basketball players who are making political statements or social statements, actors and actresses who have statements to make as well. We want them to entertain us. We want to profit off of them. We want you to keep churning out hip hop and music that's based off of your trauma.
Sell us your trauma, shuck and jive, make me laugh, shut up.
But don't say anything. Your opinion is not valuable to me.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that with athletes and celebrities and actors and actresses, because it's always funny to me when the person's like, oh, well, he's a great player, but I don't care for what he has to say, or shut up and dribble, or shut up and play the game. You make millions of dollars. Why are you complaining? But as soon as a player were to say something that you're cool with, you want to hike them on a pedestal. So how come they're not being told to just shut up and play? Obviously, we know it's because they're in agreement with your views. But if you were to be fair and use that logic and not be biased, you should be saying that to someone that even agrees with you.
Yeah,
but that's just not how these people operate.
Yeah, you should be even-handed regardless. And when Clint Eastwood or Adam Baldwin or James Woods or any other celebrity who leans to the right makes a political statement that aligns with your conservative views, then you should also say, hey, your job is just to act. Shut up. Mm-hmm. Me, a mechanic, knows a lot more about politics than you ever will, And it doesn't have to be, a blue-collar job. It could be me, an accountant, me, a lawyer, me, it doesn't matter what your profession is. You still have your own experiences that affect your worldview and your political beliefs.
And you can't discount someone's experiences because you weren't there.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to be able to be like, well, that doesn't count. You can't necessarily say that because who are you to discredit someone's experiences?
And if it's a millionaire who has a political opinion, or somebody who's homeless on the streets, it shouldn't be how much money they make determines their moral validity.
Or how much they can complain. And I think that's a big problem with people who do make these comments, because at the end of the day, we know that there's a disparity amongst groups of people in this country for an array of reasons, whether it's due to political leanings, sexual orientation, financial stability, skin color, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So you're looking at somebody like me to where, everybody, life is hard all the way around. Everybody's got something they're dealing with.
Yeah.
The thing that I've seen go around before, it's like, we're not saying your life wasn't hard. We're just saying that your skin color wasn't a reason why it was hard. So if I got all these things riding against me, now I'm rich. That's one less thing riding against me. A rich black person is still a black person. That
regardless.
Doesn't mean that, racism only affects poor black people. Racism affects all black people and other people of color. And racism knows no class.
Yeah. And think about Terry Crews, right?
Mm-hmm.
Terry Crews knows about the stereotype of the angry, aggressive black man.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why he didn't want to step up when he was sexually assaulted.
Yeah, and then he was being bashed for it and clowned for it. And, if he would have turned around and knocked that dude into next Tuesday.
Another angry black man.
Exactly. And that's the thing that we always have to keep in the back. I know I have to. And it's just, you can't come off too intimidating. You can't come off looking too mean or nasty, because if you do, that's what you get pegged as, and then that's just kind of what follows you.
Now, after they get back to Wakanda, they come back empty-handed, pun unintended, without Claw. And Wakabi has some words to share with T'Challa. And his issue with him is that he didn't bring back Claw, just like his father didn't bring Claw to justice. And he says, "Oh, I thought things would be different with this leadership. Instead, it's more of the same." This had me thinking of leadership and how it does help or doesn't help certain communities regardless of who the leadership is. Mm-hmm. It reminded me of that scene in Blackish, the election episode they had, where Dre said that he didn't want to vote, and they said, "Oh, you don't want to vote? Do you not care about your country?" And he says, "Listen, you guys are feeling now what black people have felt the entire time they've been in America. Now you're finally feeling what happens when leadership lets you down, where the systems that are put in place don't come through for you.
Or it just wasn't what you thought it was going to be.
And this is now you know what it feels like." So what is to be said about leadership for the black community?
There's been a huge argument that we haven't had substantial leadership in our community for a very long time now. That there hasn't been a leader since the days of MLK and X, because anybody else that's come up after that point just, I guess, didn't live up to that potential. And it's weird because, on the one hand, I look at it like, well, why do we need that one, leader to kind of lead us to where we need to go? Why can't we all be our own leaders and kind of just come together as a community and figure this out? But in the days during the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King doing what he did, it made progress. Like it definitely helped. I think you had Malcolm X who came in there who gave you a more radical viewpoint. But ultimately, I think he ended up kind of leaning towards what Martin Luther King was trying to push for. And a lot of people don't realize Martin Luther King was a little bit more radical than what he was made out to be. He was just the lesser of the two, or seemingly the lesser of the two.
That Black Panther uniform can only get hit so much until it starts wanted to explode back out.
It's interesting, though, because if you look at the leadership or the potential leadership after them, you had Jesse Jackson, who tried running for president but made a lot of disparaging remarks about the Jewish community. So there you go with that one. You have Al Sharpton, who gets looked at as like the boy that cries wolf all the time, which kind of like lowers his credibility in certain respects. And then other times it's like, he's going to show up, and then homie's taking selfies now and all that other shit. But
yeah. But what about Barack Obama? Did he change things? What was he about?
See, the thing is, but I want to do this.
Did life get amazingly better for black people after he was in leadership?
No. Because, and I hate to say it, but no. I'd be lying if I told. My life did not change monumentally after he was president. The biggest change for me was that I was able to say my president's black. Because what I've noticed is, and I'm not even necessarily going to fault him for it.
Yeah.
Because honestly, what I've come to learn is that every presidential candidate or every president has a certain group, has a certain policy, or has a certain bill that they're trying to get passed that's going to define their presidency. Clearly for Trump, it's the border security and the wall. For Obama, it was LGBT rights. I would say for Bush, it was the weapons of mass destruction and the war on Iraq.
The war on terror, yeah.
With Reagan, what was it? The
drugs.
Drugs, even though it was the government's fault that crack was introduced into the black communities. But anyway, everybody has like their selling point, their gimmick, if you will, as to what was going to be the defining moment of their presidency. And a lot of black people voted for him because he was black, and they just assumed, all right, we're good now. He's going to get us out of this situation. We're going to be good. And honestly, And I'm trying to remember who ended up saying, they made a good point. They said, like, we just accepted that, and we didn't hold him to any of those kinds of promises or things that we wanted. It was like he did the bare minimum, and we just applauded him for that. And I'm not even saying he didn't do anything good or didn't do anything for us at all, but maybe just not to the extent that everybody thought. And it's because maybe we thought more was going to happen than what did. Maybe we weren't being realistic. Maybe we didn't hold him to a standard that we should have. But it's like he's still looked at ultimately by the black community as, like a beacon of hope and progress and everything, because he did do something no other black man could, and that was run and win an election to become president of the United States.
And it is hard, especially in his case, for a good man to be king.
There you go. That goes back to what T'Chaka said. You're a good man with a good heart, and it's hard for a good man to be king. So with all the things that I'm sure Obama wanted to accomplish, he was not able to, because the position he was being put in, he couldn't just say, all right, so I'm black, and I got to make sure all the black people are situated. I'll worry about y'all later. He can't do that, because he's the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
The whole thing. Not only that, but he had resistance in the Senate, because it was majority Republican, so he wasn't going to be able to push much through anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. But also there was, there's a dark history to the Obama presidency also, with your drone strikes and everything like that. Like, there were war crimes that were committed.
But exposing those when he was president would be like, this is what they're not telling you. Exposing those when someone else was president would be like, you're a traitor. That's treason. You can't do that. So at the end of the day, I think what a lot of people might need to realize is that, he did something no other black man was able to do, but he was still a black man in the White House. The only other black people in the White House were the help, butlers, servers, chefs. This man was living there. The fact that he got that far is crazy. Am I going to say that he didn't do anything wrong? I'm sure he did. I'm sure he made mistakes. They all do. But to look at it and say he didn't try to, I don't know if I could say that.
Oh, well, definitely. I don't think anybody could.
No.
And you wouldn't be able to say that with really any president. You're not behind the doors. You wouldn't know what an individual tried to do. But I think this harkens back to Wakabi saying, I thought things were going to be different.
Yeah.
But it's more of the same.
That's the sentiment that I think a lot of black people had.
And in this case, we saw what happened in Korea. T'Challa did. This is back in the movie. We saw what happened in Korea.
We're stepping out of real life for a second.
T'Challa, he did his best to try and get Claw.
Well, no. Let's be clear.
He did get Claw. That's right.
They're in Korea. They have the skirmish, the car chase. He captures Claw, almost kills him, but thought better of it because of all the cameras, the flashing, and the, oh, mercy king, this, that, and the third. They capture him. He decides to play ball with the CIA a little bit because, he's even telling Ross, you can question him, but we're taking him back home. And in the middle of that questioning,
Killmonger comes,
breaks him out. He escapes. And then they come home empty-handed. And it's also funny because it's like, I had it listed before, I kind of you don't realize that they are playing ball with other organizations kind of behind the scenes, and you kind of see how things like that can kind of fall through. Or it's one of those things to where maybe if they had tried to work together better from the beginning, Claw would have made his way back to Wakanda.
In this case, Killmonger is able to take power by doing what their current king, couldn't. He kills Claw, and he brings him to justice.
Oh yeah, street justice.
He does.
and it's interesting because it was a sweetener, and it's crazy because when you see that scene to where he brings Claw's body, the border tribe are looking at him like, who's this guy? Who are you? What are you doing? And they're ready to attack this man. And then drops the body, shows him, and that changes everything. But then it also goes to show you how easily swayed W'Kabi was and how big of a deal Claw's capture was to him, that he was willing to be a traitor because somebody did something that his friend and his friend's father couldn't.
Yeah, vengeance was huge to him. Retribution, justice, depending.
So he's another character who also wanted to seek vengeance upon someone and wasn't able to handle it the best of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because look at W'Kabi now. We don't actually know where he is.
Yeah.
Probably locked up, though.
Yeah, probably. So we have this idea. I mentioned before that there was a very transparent comparison between T'Challa and Huey P. Newton. Right from the get-go, they had that promotion of him in the chair, which is a very popular picture of Huey P. Newton as well, in his wicker chair. And in real life, Huey P. Newton was killed in Oakland just a few years before Njobu was. It was 1989. So this is fresh for Njobu. And he ends up raising kind of a Bobby Seale, who is another co-founder of the Black Panther Party. And Bobby Seale's whole thing was about taking up those weapons and, as an American, using your Second Amendment right to defend yourself, which at the time Senator Ronald Reagan was one of the people who was a proponent of gun control because the Black Panther Party had started using and exercising their Second Amendment right.
They were becoming militant. He didn't like that.
And nobody likes that.
No, because the scariest thing in America to certain groups of white people was an armed and intelligent black man.
Which, in this movie,
is Killmonger. He is the epitome of, like, white people's fears at the time. And I think his tactics were brilliant. He was very much so the beat them at their own game. And the awful part about it is that in his argument with T'Challa's like, you've become what you hate. Because you're fueled by all of what you've seen and what you've been taught and what you've been exposed to, but you're becoming what you hate to stop what you hate. And to me, that also kind of lends itself to tradition again, because I felt as if tradition almost destroyed itself, like it almost collapsed on itself. In the moment where they bring Eric to the council after W'Kabi finds him and after he was able to say who he was, because they were able, like, tradition was used against them in that situation, because it was like, wait, obviously I can't speak Nosa because that's what they were speaking, but he was saying, I am Ndjaka, son of Njobu. He is a royal blood and he wants the throne. So now the council, after finding out this information and essentially having it confirmed, that is his birthright. That's how we do things. He does get to challenge. That's how this works. So that was an example of their tradition being used against them. And if he would have actually won, which he ultimately did, he was going to destroy all of that. Because after he took up the mantle, burning all the heart-shaped herbs, they weren't doing challenges anymore. They weren't going to be isolationists. They were going to send weapons out to all of his war dogs in New York and London and everywhere else, and they were going to give them weapons, usurp those governments, take over and overthrow. They were going to turn the whole notion of tradition on its ear after that point. And it's just crazy to look at that and be like, your tradition was going to be the very thing to cause your demise, at least on the level of how you live your life. Which,
if we continue with this Wakanda America metaphor, I think is very similar. We have all these traditional values, and to be fair, this is coming from a lefty liberal like me.
Oh, you're a snowflake.
Yes, exactly. The snowiest of snowflakes.
You know what's funny? I find that people that always call somebody a snowflake are the real snowflakes.
They're super sensitive.
Super sensitive.
Super sensitive.
Like over a beer commercial.
You never know. But yeah, that tradition really is what's holding us back in a lot of ways. That just because, this isn't how things were done before, that this is holding people back, but guess what? We do need something new. Maybe we don't know what that new thing is yet, but people have ideas.
You're blinded by your progress in other avenues, but you're still failing to see where you're regressing in others because they're looking at themselves as being super cultured and modern with your weapons and your use of vibranium, but you're still being held back by the policies and the notions that have been carried forward from past generations. And you don't even know for sure if those past generations wanted that to be a permanent thing. We don't know.
The thing is, past generations, and I assume in Wakanda, but definitely in America, could not predict where we would have ended up. And I think that that's a huge thing to remember with the founding fathers, even though they were slave owners, that they were a bunch of liberal 20-something college-educated dudes who got together to fight an oppressive regime. Like, they broke the law and were like, all right, now here's the rules so this doesn't happen again. But I highly doubt that, they were like, all right, well, just so we don't get oppressed again, we're going to make the Second Amendment. And then years from now, they're going to have semi-automatic weapons and there's no room to change this at all. That's not necessarily the case. There is room for nuance and for things to be changed.
And it's crazy because if you really want to put things into perspective, this is coming from a period of time to where people were using wooden dentures at a point. So it's like, how much were they really going to be able to foresee changing? Like,
yeah.
There were no cars, no electronics. People still using candles. Like, come on, dude.
Now, if you are referring to George Washington's wooden dentures, that's partially a myth.
Is it?
He had spring-loaded dentures that had some animal teeth and slave teeth in there. It was nowhere near as clean as just straight.
Oh, that makes it even worse.
Yeah, there's nothing. It wasn't just wooden dentures.
So
people didn't shower back then.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still on the animal teeth part. I just don't understand why, or just what kind of animal did he pull teeth from?
I mean, I don't think he pulled the teeth personally, but
I mean, I don't think so either. I doubt he pulled the slave teeth, but
probably not. I think mules and stuff. You can look it up. If you're listening to this, look it up. George Washington had dentures made from animal and slaves' teeth.
If y'all could see my face right now, or just like he valued mule and slave teeth about the same.
I think they all did. I'm not proud of them. So going seamlessly back to this idea of black leaders, right? We spoke about how Bobby Seale can kind of be related to the same ideals that Killmonger and his father shared. We see that when Killmonger takes over, Okoye, who has been a breakout character in this film, still has her loyalty not to him but to the throne.
To the throne.
Now, to me, this was reminiscent of the issue of black women being overly loyal to their community, even when it's detrimental to them.
You know what? After the recent research, we have uncovered some pretty crazy statistics here. But just to hold on before we get to that, at the point of time last year when those elections were going on, like especially the one in Alabama,
Roy Moore,
where it's like all the black women showed up to make sure he did not get in. And I remember I was seeing a gang of posts from people saying, black women showed up again. They had to save the day again. And about people not showing up for black women when they need it because, they do a lot of saving.
And yet aren't really being saved as much in return.
Yes, because at the end of the day, they're taking a back seat to everyone else. And I've made this argument before, but I feel like it's hard in general. It's hard to be a person of color, but it's hard to be a black dude. It is harder to be a black woman, in my opinion. And then I would even go further to say it's hard to be a gay black woman in this country. Like, just incredibly hard.
Absolutely.
And we always have black women going up to bat for us, even when we don't deserve it. Because let's face it, some of us ain't shit, but they still show up. And there's an argument, there's a cry for help or a rallying call amongst black women for us to show the support and respect that they give to us. So there's a big disparity there.
There's this huge idea of feminism in the film, and I think it was the right film to do it in because black feminism is the realist feminism. Because the idea of feminism is all about equality. So if a white woman is fighting for equality with a white man, and a black woman is fighting for equality with that white woman, then they're both fighting to be equal to that white man. And if a black woman is equal, then you sure as hell know that a black man is going to be equal too. So like that, black feminism is the tide that raises all ships. And an article from Time that came out in 2014 outlines how domestic violence is an incredible problem in the black community. It's a problem in any community when it comes to women, but the black community is so much more loyal to itself in the way that it'll put racial issues ahead of sexist issues.
Yes, because I think part of that has to do with the fact of if you can solve the race issues, it benefits both black men and women. While if you focus on the sexism issues, it's not helping the entire black community per se. Although, if you think about it in a different way, you help black women, you help everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's this rough burden to bear on your shoulders, right? It's, do you choose to help yourself as a woman, or do you choose to help your community as a black person, as a person of color? According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, an estimated 1.3 million American women experience domestic violence each year. Despite this, most cases are never reported to the police, and most women are victimized by people they know. For black women in particular, they are almost 3 times as likely to experience death as a result of domestic violence than white women.
Jeez.
And while they only make up 8% of the population, 22% of homicides that result from domestic violence happen to black women, and 29% of all victimized women, making it one of the leading causes of death for black women ages 15 to 35. Now, a big reason that this article brings up, and you can check in the show notes for it, is that black women do not trust the law enforcement. They don't trust the cops. They don't trust the authorities, synonyms. So they won't call them to come to their aid.
And that's a common theme amongst a lot of the black community, because they look at it as if they call law enforcement, somebody's leaving dead.
Yeah, someone's leaving in a body bag. So it's like, do you personally shoulder the abuse in order to protect the life of somebody else?
There goes that wearing that trauma.
It's exactly what that is. And I don't know if that was necessarily meant to be that by Ryan Coogler, but that was, kind of something that I got from it, that she is loyal to that throne.
No matter who sits upon it.
No matter who sits upon it.
Her words specifically in that argument she got into with Nakia, where she was saying, after the challenge where T'Challa was seemingly killed, they were saying they needed to get out of there. Nakia was saying that they needed to essentially figure out a way to get rid of Killmonger. And she was like, we got to get out of here. And Okoye said, I can't leave. She goes, she has a duty to her country, and then she's loyal to that throne. She's like, I can't just come and go as I choose. And obviously Nakia took that as a slight, because she's not static in her loyalty to Wakanda, because I think her loyalty kind of flows through to the people itself along with Wakanda. So they had a very good scene in that, in my opinion, just because you show someone who's not particularly loyal to any one group, but to anybody who needs the help, which you've seen black women show up for white women, you've seen them show up for black men, you've seen them show up for Jewish women, you've seen them show up for Latino, for the Latin community, and then you have the other one where Okoye is, where she's kind of just like, we need to just stick to our own community, and it can oftentimes be to their own, detriment.
Yeah, and in this case, it's interesting because Okoye says at one point that they survived by fighting only when necessary.
Only when absolutely necessary.
But what's interesting is that they survived by fighting when it was necessary for them.
Yes.
Which goes back to Killmonger's whole idea of where was Wakanda when people that look just like us
were dying.
Yeah. Being murdered and jailed and, made to have a lower quality of life. Where was Wakanda? It kind of shows the flaw in not Okoye's mentality specifically, but just the traditional mentality, because she's not the only one who believes that.
No, not at all. She was just probably one of the most prominent characters in the film to display that.
Yeah. Now, not much later on, we see this huge battle taking place, and Wakandans are fighting Wakandans. There's a civil war going on. And there's all this talk in the film of brothers and sisters, and M'Baku comes to the defense of T'Challa and those who are still loyal to him. He brings the Jabari tribe down from the mountains.
Oh, I think that was all of the Jabari tribe.
Yeah.
Even the women, too.
Is there an unspoken kinship to being black?
I think it's there. Where you might not be able to have that all across the board. It's there. I can't tell you how many times I've seen another black dude somewhere, and there's that, head nod. I see you. Like, what's up? What's going on? And it's a hard thing to explain, but it's definitely there. And oftentimes it happens when we're in an environment where there's a lack of black people. So then it's like, I'm not the only one. Cool. So, but it's just one of those things that I think, for me, I've said it to where, like, if I go somewhere and there's absolutely no black people there, I feel a little uncomfortable. If I go somewhere and there's at least like a few other black people there, okay. All right. Because you don't know.
You never know.
Yeah.
Now, does this ever work in the inverse? Does it ever work the opposite way? As in, like, you ever see maybe black people that, I don't know how to put this because it's going to imply that this like happens. As a white-looking person, you said you don't consider me white. Depends how I feel the day of, but.
Depends on how you do your hair.
Yeah. Day by day, sometimes I'll see white people doing things and think like, oh, geez, I'm kind of ashamed to look like that. And, whereas stereotypes are negative, there are some stereotypes that people do epitomize in every community. Do you ever see something like that and you're like, like...
Oh, where I'm almost embarrassed?
Yeah, I wish this kinship wasn't real.
Yeah, it's happened. It's happened. There have been times where I'm just like, don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, come on. Now he's going to think I do it.
He'll give us a bad name or...
Yeah, because it's funny that you mention that, because to me, it's like all it takes is for one of us to do something bad. We all catch shit for it. But it would take a million of us to do something good to change the perception of a few people, it seems.
It's not really on even playing fields.
No, not at all.
I think is the issue, because if one white person does something, or as it happens in real life, dozens of white people committing acts of terror, nobody thinks, oh, well, all white people are bad.
Yeah, they don't even call them what they are, which is a terrorist.
Terrorists,
They're
yeah.
a lone wolf, or they had mental issues, or they had a rough life. And it's like, nigga, we all had rough lives. I'm not going to sit there and take out my frustrations on my life at a movie theater when people are already getting, like, just destroyed by movie prices and popcorn and things of that nature. Like, they're already getting it. I don't need to add to it.
To the point that, like, I already paid enough for this popcorn.
Right?
As I'm bleeding out, let me just...
And it's not to say that it can't happen or maybe that it hasn't happened, but it seems like more often than not, when you hear of these mass shootings, it's committed by a white person who's homegrown, but they don't get the terrorist treatment or the thug treatment.
Mm-hmm.
They had some type of issue. So to me, it's always crazy that when there are apparently a lot of people in the white community that have some severe mental handicaps or issues, but then again, you don't want to do anything to help people who are in that industry or to do more research on mental health or anything like that, or stress that more. But that's your scapegoat, and if you were to actually solve that problem, you wouldn't have the scapegoat there in those types of situations.
Well, yeah, exactly. You'd realize that the problem isn't actually a mental health issue.
It's just they're a shitty person.
Because there's a lot of mental health issues in the black community as well, and a lot of different communities.
Yeah, but then I think also as a community, we got to do better to have conversations about it.
As in the black community.
Yeah, because
absolutely, yeah.
Because it seems like, because even with me, I would tell, I don't do therapy.
Yeah,
like they're gonna tell you shit you already know. So
well,
why pay somebody to tell you something you already know?
Well, that's the thing, and that's kind of the Killmonger mentality too, right? Like, you don't get to be weak. You don't get that luxury. You don't get to say, "Oh, this gives me anxiety." You know, and that was on, I'm going to call out this podcast too. I'm going to have to remember to tag all these. The Culture Kings podcast. All black hosts. And it's part of the How Stuff Works network. Awesome. And they had, and for the life of me, I can't remember exactly which basketball player it was, but they were doing a segment on him and about how he just wanted to take a break because he's been exhausted. And two of the three hosts were like, come on, man, what do you mean you get exhausted? You get paid millions of dollars to shoot a ball, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is what you do all the time. You don't get to be exhausted. And it wasn't even like a physical exhaustion. It was just emotional exhaustion from doing all this stuff. And the other host, he's like, why can't we just let black men be vulnerable? You know, why can't we just let them be weak for once?
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
I can't emote like that. And it's, the crazy thing is, it's not even like my dad was like, you can't do that. Or my mom was saying, you can't do that. It's just like society and all the other outside forces. And I'm not comfortable doing it. It's hard for me to express myself. It's hard for me to emote to somebody, which is why I tell people I can't sympathize with you. And most of the time it's because I don't want to, because that's my own personal thing. I don't like to pity people because I don't think it helps them. But I can't sympathize with you because I don't work that way. I don't do the compassion thing. I've been told I'm a very cold person at times because I just don't register things on that level. I don't operate on that emotional level. I'm logic, reasoning, data, things of that nature. I can't do that with you.
And yet, if you were to go to that ancestral plane, might see a tear from you.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows, man?
Yeah. There you go. So, leading into that, because you mentioned it's not necessarily that you were raised that way or whatever. I mean, I kind of was. You know, this idea of not really showing vulnerability. But you had a bit that you wanted to speak about regarding family members and lies and stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to get into is just that lies, and this is kind of goes without saying, but they complicate everything. That's pretty much what is behind one of the biggest themes in the movie, if you think about it, because you got to look at it on multiple levels. on a very broad level, Wakanda as a nation is lying to the rest of the world about what they are, who they are, and what they're capable of. Now, while I can understand why they would do such a thing, because they want to keep Wakanda safe, because the tradition was to always keep Wakanda safe and the people within Wakanda safe. But you see that had they not lied or kept up with the lie, how if they would have gotten involved in certain world events, the course of things could have changed for the better, or just the results would have been vastly different. Now, if we want to minimize that, King T'Chaka, he lied about the situation involving Njobu to T'Challa and I'm assuming the rest of Wakanda. And as the result, even T'Challa says it, what was created, they created a monster. What they did made the situation worse. That Killmonger was something of their own doing. So by him wanting to keep up with the lie, he created a monster in Killmonger, who's his nephew.
Yeah.
And his nephew, the lie, could have destroyed everything that he lied for, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was this idea of him wanting to keep up that lie because the truth represented such a smear.
An ugliness.
Yeah, it was an absolute ugly truth, and that is reminiscent of America to a T. We may have achieved great things, but you can't deny the dark, dark history.
Yeah, the blood that's on America's hands, the bodies that we have stepped on or have built things upon.
Yeah.
And the process of getting to where we are now. You got to wonder, like, just to touch on the war criminal thing with Snowden and everything, they wouldn't have been sought after so vehemently if what they had to say wasn't true or if it wasn't detrimental to America. Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely got to put some things into perspective, because if you want to go back to Wakanda now, if he were to come home and say he killed his brother because he betrayed Wakanda and he left someone of royal blood in Oakland, how would T'Chaka look after that?
Well, I think that was honestly the worst part, because T'Challa isn't upset at his father when he goes back to the ancestral plane. I don't think he's upset with his father for killing his own brother. He said, "Why didn't you bring the boy home?" Mm-hmm. That was the big thing. Just bring him home. Why? You created a monster, and the worst part is that's so common where he came from. Mm-hmm. What happened to Killmonger happens to people all the time. So maybe they might not have the same means or the same mind that Killmonger has. But what kind of monsters are created then? What kind of people are set up to fail from the beginning? What kind of people do horrible things as adults, and you go back and look at where they came from and go, wow.
No wonder.
This person was never given a chance.
Mm-hmm. Or had this happened to them, maybe they'd be a different person. And you can even draw that back to what we were talking about earlier about how they don't want anybody coming into Wakanda, but if they need to go somewhere else, that's fine, because you send your own brother on a war dog assignment to America, in California, Oakland specifically, to spy, right?
Yeah.
What was the point of it? Like, what were you hoping to find out from doing that? So it all kind of comes back to all of that, like the lengths that you were willing to go to uphold the tradition of keeping Wakanda safe through isolation. And also, it really kind of hammers home the whole, it's hard for a good man to be king, because I think he implied that you're going to have to do some bad things to be king.
Yeah, and that is the tradition. This idea of how do we hold our leaders accountable, right? Mm-hmm. These days, when somebody complains about Donald Trump, there's two main whataboutisms that people go to. They'll say, "Oh, well, what about Hillary? Blah blah blah. You think she would have been much better?" Blah, blah. It doesn't matter how good or how bad Hillary would have been. I'm going to hold my leader accountable regardless. Mm-hmm. And would she have been perfect? Fuck no. But I would have held her accountable also.
Yep.
You know, at no point would I have been like, oh, she did this, but at least she's not Trump. No, and then the other one is they go, well, what about Obama? Obama did this, Obama did that, blah, blah, blah. Hold your leaders accountable regardless, which is what T'Challa learns to do. He doesn't just yell at his father in the ancestral plane.
All of the Black Panthers that came before him, you were all wrong.
And that's what he says. That is his moment. That's his growth. That's his maturity, because he realizes things aren't so black and white, that
there's a gray area.
There is, and there's room for growth.
That's the moment to where he breaks the cycle, or makes the decision to break the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, him breaking the cycle was at the expense of Eric, because there was no way he was going to be able to do that given their situation. There was too much hate between them. There was too much. There was too many lies. He was radicalized. You can't revert him back to being that kid anymore. So he's who he's gonna be. And if they didn't destroy those ships that were gonna transport those weapons to New York and London and everywhere else, who knows what would have happened. And he was saying that we have to stop him. He has to go. So that was a mess that he had to clean up.
Yeah, and that was and I think that's the worst part of it too, is that he was able to sympathize for his cousin
that he barely knew.
And
that also, I think, bled into why he wasn't able to fight him to the best of his ability. Because what I've noticed is T'Challa is very much so led by his emotions. He can keep a calm head and, assess a situation with the best of them. But if there's something weighing heavy on his heart, or if there's something affecting him on that level, it distorts things for him. Because even with his fight with M'Baku, I think he was kind of in his own head about things. And then it was that moment where Ramonda, his mom, was saying, show him who you are, to where he snapped out of it.
Love that moment.
And he was just like, I'm Prince T'Challa, and he's going to be king of Wakanda. And then in the moment where he was fighting Eric, I think the guilt and the lies and all that was weighing down on him, and that affected how he fought. And not that he gave up, it's just that he wasn't him.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see it. And then after being revived, in a sense, and going back, he was renewed, and he was able to get the job done that time.
Yeah, well, I think he knew what he had to do, regardless of this gray area, because Killmonger was going to fight to the death.
Oh, yeah.
Now, T'Challa, he didn't want to kill him. Now, I'm just talking about the ceremony at the waterfall. Killmonger was definitely going to fight him to the death, and I don't think that T'Challa wanted to kill him.
Mm-mm.
And even in the end, that's not what he wanted to do.
Because he even said, I still think we can heal you.
Yeah, they have their fight on the Underground Railroad, and he ends up stabbing Killmonger, takes him to finally see the sunset in this beautiful moment.
That his dad talked about so much.
Yeah, he realizes that, and Killmonger decides to die. He's not gonna live in captivity. He's not gonna live in prison.
Yeah, and then he has the very popular quote at the end where he says something to the effect of, I'm not going to do it justice, but bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships because they knew that death was better than bondage.
Yeah.
So that's a very powerful quote, because what would his life have been if he would have just complied? I
mean, probably pretty good. Not for him, but I think it would have. It's Wakanda, like. I'm sure they have some pretty sweet. They have a sweet jail set up and stuff, and
probably not. He'd probably be under 24-hour surveillance.
Yeah, but T'Challa. The thing is, T'Challa's a cool dude. Like, I don't think things would have been that bad. I do. Now, this is time for my little theory. Okay, my theory is that T'Challa, because there was a wide shot when the two of them were there, and Eric had died. T'Challa like reaches from his hip and then puts Eric's hands in a cross on his chest. I think there's a good chance that he put a Komoyo bead in Eric's chest. We know for a fact that A, the Komoyo bead worked on Everett Ross and saved his legs, if not his life. B, the heart-shaped herb has certain healing qualities, and Eric had the heart-shaped herb in his system. C, this entire movie is about breaking cycles and not being your father. Maybe T'Challa had a moment of judgment where he felt too invested in it, because honestly, if it was Killmonger's decision to die, he should have died. That was his decision. But I think that there's a good chance that T'Challa, over the guilt and over this idea of, my father killed your father, I'm not going to kill you, maybe put a Komoyo bead in there. And somewhere in Wakanda, Killmonger is still alive. Likely? No. But how awesome would that be?
It would be pretty cool, and it's not like comic book characters can't die and be resurrected.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know everybody's coming back in Endgame. So.
There you go. And there's a cool way to do, like, you could do a couple things, right? You could do T'Challa comes back in Endgame, and then for Black Panther 2, he, like, remembers everything that happened, and he's just like, listen, I need a break. He leaves, or something like that. The city of Atlantis, led by Namor.
Oh, you're talking about that whole thing?
Wouldn't that be cool? The city of Atlantis, led by Namor, decides to attack Wakanda, and they're like, we need a king. Who do we go to? And they go down into the depths of Wakanda, and boom, wake up Killmonger.
Now, as cool as that theory is, I don't think that's what happened.
Probably not. But
because I was paying attention for it to see. It simply, to me, just looked like
he crossed his hands.
Just crossed his hands. And it's like, it's interesting, too, because he crossed his arms in the same fashion that they do when they do the Wakanda Forever. And I think it was symbolic and poetic for him, because we can certainly say he's never done it. He was looked at as an outsider by everybody.
Oh, wow, yeah. He never did the Wakanda chant.
And then finally, at the end, in his death, he's not an outsider anymore.
Wow. That never even occurred to me.
Right?
That was beautiful.
Shit.
That was beautiful.
So it's interesting, and it's really funny because as far as like the actors involved in the scene, Michael B. Jordan tried to like step up for Chadwick Boseman, saying like, can y'all stop asking him to do the Wakanda Forever thing? It's getting kind of old because he's been doing it for like 8 months.
Okay.
So it's just funny to me that it's like at the end of that one, he finally gets to do it. And then in real life, Michael B. Jordan's like, hey, yo, chill out with that, because you can't just keep asking him to do that.
So, of course, we come to an end in the film. We see that T'Challa decides to use his resources to give back to the disenfranchised. He goes to the exact same neighborhood where his uncle had been killed, to the same building. He buys that building, and he wants to set up a Wakandan
outreach program.
Yes.
That he has Nakia head, and then he wanted to set up a science program that Shuri was going to head. So, and then I think it was an awesome part because at the same basketball court Eric was at when Jobu was killed, you see these 4 or 5 different boys playing basketball, and they see the ship and they're enamored by the ship. And one boy in particular looks at T'Challa and says, "Is that yours?" And he just looks at the kid and he's like, "Who are you?" And it kind of makes you wonder, had that been what happened with Eric, how different would his life be?
Wow.
If instead of just, shit, I killed my brother, we got to get the fuck out of here, never talk about this ever again, Zuri, let's get the fuck out of here. If he would have been like, listen, we're going to take you home. You need to get on the ship. We have things we got to talk about. How different would his life be?
Absolutely, because he was all about Wakanda, right? You know, and it would have been rough because you lost your father, but also
you would have gained an entire community
Yeah.
You would have gained an uncle, cousins, an aunt, other family, other tribes to have a kinship with. Although he still could have ended up wanting to do what he did because he would still remember people back home like his mother, who
Yeah,
would
that's
be an
true.
outsider.
That's true.
And, you know, his friends.
Yeah.
But
also knowing that, you know, what was done for the throne.
yeah. But then he might have felt super entitled to that throne.
That is possible. There are a lot of things. But yeah, you know, what you just said really harkens back to this idea of just seeing, wow, that can be mine. What they said looks like a Chitauri spaceship.
No, they said it looked like a Bugatti.
No, Bugatti spaceship.
A Bugatti spaceship.
Sorry.
Talking about selling it on eBay.
That was perfect. Damn it, I fell into it because one of the podcasts I was listening to said, oh, did they think it was a Jabari spaceship? What does that mean? Or, no, they said Chitauri spaceship. And I remember saying in my head, I'm like, no, it's a Bugatti spaceship. It's a car that they're referencing, you guys.
Stop it.
I just fell into it.
You did.
But yeah, but just seeing that, oh, wow, I can have this. You don't think anything is attainable. You don't think you're ever going to overcome, but you see someone else who has gotten theirs and you go, okay, I'm going to be the next one. There's a good chance that that kid could be a superhero later on.
Yeah, you inspired that kid simply through you being present.
And he did what Eric wanted to do, but he didn't provide weapons. He provided knowledge.
And knowledge. And just now there's this notion of, I don't know who this dude is, but he has this crazy looking spaceship. I gotta find out. And then they get to be a part of the outreach program or the science program, and they learn about all the stuff that Sherry knows about, or even just a piece of it, and then they'd be able to take that and better their lives from that.
And of course, in the mid-credits scene, there is this, in case you didn't get the idea of what this movie was about, there's this scene of T'Challa speaking in front of the UN, right?
Yes.
And he says some stuff.
Yes. He is pretty much, to kind of just paraphrase, saying that we're going to provide aid. We're going to kind of like come out of the shadows, and that, you know, we do have our differences, but we should all act as if we're a part of the same tribe. He was saying, you know, in times of crisis, the wise build bridges while the foolish build barriers. And he was saying that that's something that they shouldn't be doing. They should be coming together. And he was saying that, you know, Wakanda was going to be a big part of that. So then I think it was a UN member that was pretty much just like, what is Wakanda going to be able to do? Because they're still going off of the fact that they believe Wakanda's a third world country that just deals in textiles.
Shithole country.
Yeah, like you just see the smirk on T'Challa's face, just like, you have no idea.
You're going to learn today.
you going to learn today, UN.
But that is such an interesting idea, because when you really think about, oh, we don't want immigrants coming over here and bringing this and bringing that. Steve Jobs' parents were refugees. Now, should we be letting people over here just because we think they can help us? And, you know, not necessarily. You know, we should be letting people over here because it's the right thing to do.
Well,
as long as
that's the selling point of this place, is it not?
Yeah.
Not only that, I mean, if you think of like what Rockefeller, Carnegie, they were immigrants, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people that immigrated here became something great? And even if they don't, that shouldn't be the takeaway. That shouldn't be what you go off of to determine whether someone is worthy of coming here. Don't profess to be the melting pot and the American dream and all this other stuff, but you have an issue with certain people making their way into this country.
Yeah, I mean, there are great medical and scientific minds and even great creators and entertainers from all around the world.
And there are even just regular people trying to live regular lives.
There's that as well.
Which there's nothing wrong with that, because you need those people.
Absolutely. I've never met anyone who loved America more than my boss from the Chinese restaurant that I used to work at. He was he was telling me about how terrible it was growing up in his little rural village in China, and how much he loves America because, of the fact that you can get medical attention and then pay for it afterwards instead of just having to die because you're poor.
And when you hear that puts some stuff into perspective.
It really does. And, he does love this country. And I think last I heard of him, he went into the military.
Really?
Yeah. They sold the Chinese restaurant.
What?
Yeah, I know, it's rough. So that is the case. There's this, build bridges, not barriers.
Operate as if we're a part of one tribe.
Yeah, don't create enemies and deny your history in doing so.
Hold on to your tradition, but not to the point to where it becomes a detriment to yourself.
And the most important scene in the film, I would say, the post-credits scene. You have Shuri, who has woken up the White Wolf.
No, the kids woke up the White Wolf.
The kids woke up the White Wolf.
She was trying to shoo them away.
Shuri has cleaned out his mind and ideally rehabilitated him because he was brainwashed. And if you said the right words in the right order in the right language in front of him, he would go insane.
And just start killing folks.
There you go. So she has this whole bit with him, which is nice. Didn't really have to be put in the movie, but it's cool that it was there. You find out that Bucky is living a good old life in Wakanda.
Bucky's back.
Yes.
And there's a nice takeaway. Black women are magical because they did something nobody in America or Russia could do. And that was get Bucky back.
That's right. And I have one question for you.
Oh, boy.
Do you think Bucky is allowed to say the N-word?
Whew. That's gonna be a fuck no.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's a no.
Bucky might be invited to the cookout though.
He'll be invited to the cookout.
Like he'll get a plate, but nah, he ain't saying that good.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like after all they did for him, and he thinks he gets entitled to say, nah, fam. like he's just like, can I do Wakanda forever? And they're like, you need 2 arms for that.
Yikes. So Bucky knows his place.
Oh yeah, I would think so. Don't bite the hand that gives you an arm.
Nice. Good. All right. So any closing statements regarding this film, what it represents, what it means, what happened in it?
Well, I for one would like to say it was an awesome movie. Blackness was at an all-time high watching this movie. There was such a feeling of community amongst the black community when this movie was coming out. I can't tell you how many videos I saw of people in like kente cloth and just like dancing and celebrating the movie and just showing up for this movie and just showing their support and adoration for this movie. And it even stemmed beyond just people in the black community. There were people of other backgrounds that also loved the movie for what it was and what it represented, and also what it could mean for their communities too. Because hopefully this gives you more conversations. This gives you more diversity, and this shows you that one, a movie with a predominantly black cast can do well domestically and globally, because that was one of the arguments that were being made as to why they didn't make movies that casted a predominantly black cast, because they don't know if it would do well overseas. And it's like, well, if you think about it, not everybody overseas is white, but you have plenty of movies with predominantly white cast. I don't think they have a problem with that.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that from this point that those weak arguments are kind of put to bed, and that you get more diversity, not just to pander to a particular audience, quote unquote pander, but so you get to see an accurate portrayal of people, because there's more to America and the world than just white folks. Sorry to break it to you.
No, absolutely. And I've said that many a times with arguing with people online, as I tend to do, is they're like, oh, they want to make this Avenger this color, or oh, they want a more diverse Avengers, blah blah blah. I was like, the Avengers are a New York-based team.
Mm-hmm.
Go to New York City one day in your life. Tell me how many different types of people you see.
Plenty.
You know, and that's
and we're
it.
Not even talking the tourists.
Oh,
the actual inhabitants of New York City. That's one of the most diverse cities in the country. Period.
And it's not as if I believe in the term political correctness, because it's not a real thing.
No, just like black on black crime, Hispanics, and other terms that were made up by cranky ass white people.
There you
anyways.
go. But it's just a matter of being correct. If you want to make a superhero team based in New York, it should have a lot. Not only white people are going to get the superpowers.
Right? Like
that just makes no sense. Not only white men are going to get superpowers.
Like even superpowers are racist. They're just like, nah, pimp, we can't give you that. You gotta be of a certain ilk to receive super strength. Like, all right.
That same spider hops off of Peter, bites a black kid, and the kid just dies. It's like, oh, what about my powers? Come on.
No, like he sits there and he's like, oh man, who am I going to hop onto? He sees like Peter, he's like, he seems all right. But then he's like, what about that guy over there? Nah, I don't bite black people.
Oh man. So yeah, it is very important to have this this representation, and to just know that based on the numbers, the sales numbers alone, minority is just a word at this point. The minority is not the minority.
That's right.
The minority is coming out as the majority to show how they feel with their dollars.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy to see how much buying power black people have.
Mm-hmm.
Or just anybody from, anybody from a minority community.
Yeah. And you mentioned before, when it comes to voting also, that if they decide to come out to vote,
they show up.
That minority is not the minority anymore. I know there were a lot of people saying like, oh, this isn't, a racial movement. It's just a movie, blah, blah, blah. We don't get like this whenever this movie comes out and that movie.
It's the norm.
Yeah, because you always have those characters. You'll always have these white characters.
And it's always easy to speak from that perspective because you don't know anything else. Now, if we were to live in a world to where there was plenty of representation of black people and it was white audiences that felt like they were underrepresented or marginalized, would you be singing the same tune? I doubt it.
Definitely not. And what was interesting is that Martin Freeman, the actor who played Everett Ross, did mention behind the scenes that he felt finally what it was like to be a minority, because the majority of the cast and crew were black. And he's like, oh, so this is how black people feel.
All the time.
All the time. And that's how I felt watching Luke Cage for the first time also. I was like, wow, there's like no white people in this show.
Except for the one crooked guy.
Yeah. Weird. But, then I, noticed. I'm like, oh, all right, there you go. But yeah, it may not be a racial movement. But I'd be willfully ignorant, if I were to say that it doesn't represent something. And hopefully a couple years down the road, probably be later, but hopefully a couple years down the road, it won't. Hopefully it'll be the norm.
Just think about it. How great would it be if whenever you see a lineup for movies, there's just an array of different actors, actresses, writers, producers, directors from all different backgrounds, because you get different stories from different people. Someone like Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese wouldn't be able to tell the same story Ryan Coogler can.
Absolutely.
Or even Ava DuVernay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you open yourself up to get a lot of very interesting, compelling, and different stories being told when you have different people telling the stories.
No, that's a really good point to go out on. That in entertainment, in everything, variety is the spice of life.
I would agree.
And if you're tired of the same old in Hollywood or whatever you're playing or watching or anything like that, it would be time to shake things up because different people can tell different types of stories. That doesn't mean that black characters should only be directed by black directors or white for white or women for women or anything like that. But it is important to bring a multitude of experiences into this space. And that whereas I may not feel that Black Panther is a movement, I know what it represents. And I was right there crying in the theater. My mom had no idea why. My father and I were both crying. And I said, well, what color is Captain America's skin? And she said, white. I said, what color is Iron Man's skin? And she said, iron. I don't think she got what I was getting at. But white, I don't think white superheroes take away from anyone who's not white, but
they also don't necessarily provide anything to those characters either.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not always the point of it, but there's something to be said about a group of people who are so used to seeing somebody in a heroic position that looks like them versus somebody who isn't.
And there you go. And when it's much better to see that than to always see them as the villain or the gang member or the sidekick or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Falcon's cool, War Machine's cool too, but
they're not T'Challa though, man.
They're not.
Because, let's look at it this way. Is Clint Barton getting his own movie?
Nah.
Right?
Nah.
Or War Machine or Falcon getting their own movie?
No.
T'Challa did.
There you
There's
go.
Something to be said about it.
That's it. So, for the PolitiPop podcast,
this is Joshua Williams signing off.
And this has been Mike Booch. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, no matter what sort of media you're taking in, if you're reading something, watching something, listening to some music, or even playing a video game, always remember to keep thinking, keep learning, and to read between the lines. So that was it. Hopefully you enjoyed part 2 of our Black Panther breakdown. Thanks to Josh for joining me again. Can't wait to have him on another podcast. Thanks to all of you for listening. Special thanks to Antonia Little for logo design. Whether you liked or hated whatever we had to say, let us know. You can find us on Twitter at PolitiPopPod. Find us on Instagram at PolitiPopPodcast. Email us at PolitiPopcast@gmail.com and find our show notes and sources at PolitiPopPodcast.wordpress.com. For listening to the entire thing, I'm going to treat you to a fun song to write out into your weekend on. This is All Black Everything by Lupe Fiasco, followed by some outtakes. While we are on the T'Challa, what's Eric's Wakanda name again?
Njadaka.
What?
Njadaka.
Did I write that? For real?
So it's like N
apostrophe
Jadaka.
What the fuck? It's not a jungle. What is it?
Because there ain't no fucking jungles in there.
No,
all right?
It's a plane. It's literally
a
is.
Plane.
It's a fucking plane, right?
Yeah, like it's Disney's some. Yeah. Anyway,
Nakia and Okoye have. I can say those fucking correctly. Should I mention Post Malone?
No,
fuck him. He doesn't deserve the time of day.
Yeah, or just the fact that you're blinded by your progress. The fuck was that?
It was a bird. We see that T'Challa decides to use his resources to give back to... I completely agree, and that's a really good point to go out on. Peace.